The Shep Naz Podcast begins now.
You're listening to the Shep Naz podcast at Shepherd Church. Everything we do here is to help people take their next steps towards Jesus, and this podcast is part of that. We want to help you engage daily in spiritual development. We are going to take a quick break from our series in 1 Peter, and we're going to dive into Holy Week. So coming up this week, all week that you are experiencing right now is Holy Week. And so this past Sunday, we had a message about Palm Sunday. So Pastor Rob's here. We're going to kind of break that message down. And we're looking forward to our Good Friday experience this weekend, and also Resurrection Sunday, Easter Sunday coming up this weekend. So Pastor Rob, what's up, man?
Oh, man. Palm Sunday is a big deal.
Yeah.
And I think, a lot of times as Christians, we celebrate these things over and over again. Palm Sunday comes every year, Easter, Pentecost, all that kind of stuff. But I think there's just a lot of deep, rich meaning in Palm Sunday. So much symbolism. Jesus didn't do anything on accident.
Yeah.
Everything he did was intentional. And the more I study it, I preached on it 10 times, right?
Yeah.
As a pastor. And every time I jump into it again, it's like, you just keep seeing stuff that you didn't see before, didn't know. And there's so much to it. And so I want to talk about Palm Sunday a little bit. That's what we preached about on Sunday, but kind of want to dive into that a little bit, get some extra stuff and talk about it.
So let's go ahead and read. This comes from Mark chapter 11. And so this is what it says. It says, when they approached Jerusalem at Bethphage and Bethany near the Mount of Olives, he sent two of his disciples and told them, go into the village ahead of you. As soon as you enter it, you will find a colt tied there on which no one has ever sat. Untie it and bring it. And if anyone says to you, why are you doing this? Just say, the Lord needs it, and we'll send it back here right away. So they went, they found a colt outside in the street, tied by a door. They untied it, and some of those standing there said to them, what are you doing, untying this colt? And they answered just as Jesus had said, and so they let him go. They brought the donkey to Jesus and threw their clothes on it, and he sat on it. Many people spread their clothes on the road, and others spread leafy branches cut from the fields. And those who went ahead and those who followed him shouted, Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our father David. Hosanna in the highest heaven. He went into Jerusalem and into the temple. After looking around at everything, since it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12.
Yeah. Good. So that's, you said that was from Mark.
That was from Mark.
Yeah, and you can read that story, Matthew's and Luke's version as well. But just to kind of set the stage a little bit, because it was more than just Jesus riding into town on a road from out in the country. So there are three festivals that Jewish people are compelled to participate in. There's the Passover, which what was happening in Jerusalem at this time was the Passover. Yeah. But there's also Pentecost and the Feast of Tabernacles. Passover, they're all big, they're all important, they're all very meaningful. But Passover, it was a big deal, and it was the desire of every Jew to celebrate the Passover at least once in their lifetime in Jerusalem. And oftentimes, if they were not celebrating the Passover in Jerusalem, when they were celebrating it, they would say, this year here, but next year, Jerusalem, right? So it was a big deal. And so because of this, because Jews everywhere wanted to be in Jerusalem for Passover, whenever Passover occurred, Jerusalem and the cities surrounding Jerusalem were just jam-packed with people, because no matter where you live, people wanted to celebrate Passover in Jerusalem. From my study, I have gathered that Jerusalem was home to somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 60,000 people. So, it's kind of about the same size as Gehenna. I think Gehenna is 40-some thousand people, whatever. So that's a pretty big town, right? Yep. And it was, all back in those days. But at Passover, historians would tell us that the population would swell to 2 million.
Yeah.
So think about Gehenna having 40-some thousand people live in it. And then when Passover comes, there's 2 million people. Right. That's like, I don't know, I should know my math. It's like maybe for every one person, there's another 5
in
or
a pretty
50.
Small footprint too for Jerusalem.
Right, and it had a wall around
houses
everything.
on top of each other.
Right.
Walls, I mean,
One of the things that happens at Passover is the priests would make a sacrifice, and it's the sacrifice of a lamb for families, and so that's part of the ritual of Passover. One year there was a census that was taken of the lambs that were slaughtered at Passover in Jerusalem, and there were 256,000 lambs that were slaughtered in the temple during that Passover week.
Wow!
So here's the other thing that's interesting is that in order for a priest to sacrifice a lamb, it had to be representative of about a minimum of 10 people. Could have been more. And so if that estimate is correct, if there was 256,000 lambs that were sacrificed, and each lamb was representative of 10 people that were there, that'd be 2.5 million people.
Yep.
So why all this is important is because that was going on when Jesus rode into town on a donkey. Like it was, so Jesus just picked a very, very busy time to do this. At the same time, Jesus, it was at the height of his popularity. Just days before this happens, he raised Lazarus from the dead, and everybody heard about it. If it would have been today, it would have been all over social media, right? But everybody's talking about Jesus. He's been teaching for almost 3 years now. He's been doing miracles. Crowds of people are following him. They're talking about him being the Messiah. The religious leaders are worried. So Jesus at the height of his popularity, right? And the religious leaders are worried, and they're worried for 3 reasons. They're worried because Jesus was so popular, he was threatening their leadership. Like people are not following the religious leaders anymore. They're like, let's follow Jesus. He's cooler. That's what they're saying. And Jesus is becoming more popular than they were. But also what happens is that the Roman government entrusted these religious leaders with the peace of the city. And so if the city would get in an uproar, the Roman government would come in and say to the religious leaders, you're not doing your job.
What are you doing?
Exactly.
If we have to come in here and clean up this mess, then we're just going to put an end to what you're doing, and we'll just do it ourselves.
Right. And they were afraid of that.
Yeah.
They were afraid they were going to lose their deal.
I want to live like you and see people how you see them.
I want your mission to be my mission.
I don't want to shrink back from the big questions. Help me to listen deeply as you would.
God, so many things try to hold us back, but let your love speak louder than fear.
By your Spirit, Lord, remind me I don't have to be who I'm not.
I can connect compassionately out of who you made me to be, even out of my brokenness.
Lead me as I share the simple gospel.
Refresh me in the midst of resistance.
Fill me with fresh vision for the next generation.
And let me know the joy of connecting the people you love back to
you. Fear and discouragement can cause us to shrink back from sharing the good news, but spiritual openness is rising in the U.S. God is calling us to remember why He sent His Son, not to condemn the world, but to save it. If you'd like to learn more how to share your faith or sharpen up your skills on how to share Jesus with others, please join Pastor Rob starting Wednesday, April 3rd in the sanctuary for an 8-week class on sharing your faith. This 8-part video-driven course is full of inspiring stories and actionable challenges from 18 amazing contributors.
So all of that's happening, right? And the religious leaders are worried that things are getting out of hand, they're going to lose their authority. And Jesus comes riding into town. And what happens is Jesus is making a very deliberate statement about himself. He didn't say these words, but the symbolism of what he does is it communicates, right?
Sure.
So when Jesus rides into town, he's received in the city like he's this conquering king. You just read it. He's riding down the road on a donkey. People are lining the streets, both sides of the streets. They're waving palm branches. They're throwing their clothes down on the ground for the donkey to walk over because they see Jesus as a king. This was a custom that they would do.
It's like a processional for a king.
Right, right. And all the Jewish authorities see this, and they're like, they're worried, right? And they're worried for one big reason, and that is because what Jesus did was he was making a claim. Like he was, when Jesus did this, he was literally saying, I am the Messiah. Like he could have just said it, right? And later on in the week, he does say it because Pilate asked him. But that would be too easy. And rabbis back then, they were good about creating these dramatic moments, right? They didn't, like Jesus could have just said one day, by the way, everybody, if you're wondering, I'm the Messiah. He could have waited till there's 2.5 million people in a city made for 40,000 people. He could have rode in on a donkey, making all these things. And that's what he did, right? And so when Jesus rode on a donkey, people are like, well, why did he choose a donkey, right? Well, the reason that he chose a donkey was because it was very intentional, right? It wasn't an impulse or whatever. It was something he'd been planning. And when you read this, you said that he told his disciples to go in and where they would find the donkey. And that it was one that had never been ridden before. And that people were saying, if somebody says, why are you taking that? Tell them this. And all this happened, right? So it wasn't like Jesus, it was he had this set up. He knew it, right? I don't know if Jesus snuck in and tied a donkey up or he had somebody do it, or he just knew that there was going to be one there. I don't know. But he went in ahead, right? He sent them ahead. He took care of it. And what this was is it was a fulfillment of prophecy. Yeah. So in Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9, it says, "Rejoice, O people of Zion, shout in triumph, O people of Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming to you. He is righteous and victorious, yet he is humble, riding on a donkey's colt." And so the use of a donkey was interesting, right? Like I'm thinking if you're going to be a king coming into town, I would pick a black stallion, strong, muscular and all that. But Jesus rode a donkey,
a young donkey,
a colt that had never even been ridden, right? And
he probably looked silly on it. Because I've seen little donkeys. They're not.
He looked big. I'm sure he is bigger than the donkey. He probably could have put the donkey on his shoulders and carried it. Yeah. But what's interesting is that if a king, like again, there's so much symbolism back in that day. If a king comes into town riding on a stallion, it means he's coming into town and he's declaring war, right? But if the king comes into town riding on a donkey, or like Jesus did, it means you're coming in peace. Well, this is interesting because Jesus was coming to declare war against all the spiritual enemies of his people, but he was coming in peace, right? And so people saw this and they knew this, right? So this riding a donkey was communicating that Jesus was coming as a king of peace and love, not a conquering military hero, and everybody knew all this stuff. And then again, you had mentioned that they were throwing palm branches and tossing their garments along the road. And it seems weird to us. I mean, it would seem even more weird to see someone going down the road on a donkey here. Although I did hear that when this church was here, Hamilton Road was a dirt road. And so there could have been horses and buggies there.
There could have been.
And 150 years ago, there were.
When I was little, our church down in Franklinton down there, it was called Avondale United Methodist Church. They for sure made us Sunday school kids walk the streets with palm branches and a real live donkey on Palm Sunday.
Awesome. How do you feel about that?
Looking back on it, I'm not sure I would do it again.
Especially in Franklinton, anyway, right?
So,
Well, back then, we digress. Sorry about that. Back then, it wasn't uncommon for people to do this for leaders. And so, actually, it was a sign of respect. And it indicated their submission to the authority of the leader. So when they're, doing these palm branches and they're throwing their garments down and letting the donkey that the king is riding on walk on their garments, is literally saying it was a sign of submission. Yeah. So the religious leaders are seeing this and they know what's happening. Like Jesus is saying, I'm the Messiah. Yeah. And all of these people are saying, you're our king, because they're throwing their stuff down.
They weren't confused and they weren't like, what's happening here? They knew exactly what was happening. And they knew that it was not only was it threatening their power, but they're thinking, if this gets back to Rome, we're toast.
Well, it was threatening their religious power and their leadership. Yep. Yeah, so you're right. And then the other thing that was a clue to them that Jesus was claiming to be king was that everyone was shouting Hosanna. Yeah. I mean, and this is a phrase that means save now, like save us now. Like literally Jesus is riding down the road on a donkey. The road is lined on both sides with people waving palm branches and throwing their coats down, and they're shouting, "Hosanna, save us now!" And here's why we know Jesus was making this statement. He could have stopped them. He could have said, "No, that's not true," but he didn't.
Yeah.
And the fact that Jesus didn't rebuke the people for saying these things is really an affirmation. Like Jesus is literally saying, "Yep, I am he, and I am here, and I have come, and I've waited till there's 2.5 million people in this town to do it, so everybody will know."
Yep.
It's huge.
Yep. There's no
huge.
I don't want there to be any mistake about what's happening right now.
Right.
So I'm waiting until now.
Yeah.
I'm going to do this, so there will be no. I wonder if you're going to know.
Yep.
My stance and who I am or who I claim to be.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to deal with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's big. And I'm trying to think of what would be a modern day analogy of you have a message that you want a lot of people to see, maybe like fly an airplane with a banner behind it over Ohio Stadium and say, "I'm the Messiah." Yeah. I mean, that's what he was doing. Everybody knew it. And think about 2.5 million people being jam-packed into this small place. When the buzz starts, you've played the phone line game, people start talking. And no doubt, within an hour, everybody in the entire city knew it. Going from one end of the city to the other, everybody knew it. Jesus just came. He's claiming to be the Messiah. This is how he came in. He didn't stop him. The religious leaders are all upset. I mean, what an incredible claim. So tomorrow, what I want to do is talk about the rest of the message. And Jesus was also, Jesus was making a claim. Don't miss that. But he also, and we'll just talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah.
I don't want to blow it.
Yeah, we don't. We're not going to spoil anything unless you were at church or listened to the message from Sunday. And spoiler alert is out there. So that will wrap up our episode today. We're going to come back tomorrow. We're going to finish talking about this. Don't forget, this week is a big week. We got lots of stuff going on. We want you to be a part of it. We still have some spots open for our Good Friday walkthrough experience, our Good Friday experience. We want you to be there. So come on down and come be a part of that. Also, Resurrection Sunday is this Sunday. We don't want you to miss it. Here also in Johnstown in a brand new location. Don't miss that. You can find all out about that social media pages, website, and app. Thanks for listening.
Hey, before you go, don't forget you can text the word Holy Week to 614-820-8094 and get texts all week about what's going on in Jesus' life.
There you go. Have a great day.
This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.